Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Pleasure Points Podcast. I'm your host, James Rohr. Thank you for being here. This episode, I break down stress and one of the foundational triggers that cause us to feel stressed and anxious. So it's a good episode. Thank you for being here. Share this episode, if you would, with people that you know are really stressed out. Hopefully they don't take it as a passive-aggressive or aggressive-aggressive share. Hey, here's a podcast all about stress. I think you should really hear about it. If you find it to be helpful, if you could rate the show in iTunes, your reviews and ratings really help get the message out there. So thank you guys for being here and enjoy the show. Yo, what's up? Pleasure Points Podcast. It's happening. Here we are. Another day. Another start of your week. Hopefully you're doing good. Not getting too antsy. Doing all the things that you should do. Listening to the government. Being good, obedient citizens. Just kidding, government, if you're listening. I mean, I'm not kidding. I'm serious. Everyone's obedient. Hey, so I wanted to pop on here and talk a little bit about. So last week, Jen and I were teaching a couple of classes on mental health and essential oils and yoga and acupressure and all the things. And the classes were great, and it was fun because I haven't really given a talk like that in a while, and it reminded me. I mean, it brought me right back into, I don't know, it was probably 6 or 7 years ago when I wrote the book Unlearning Stress. And in the process of giving these talks, I realized how excited and like passionate I get about this topic. Because one of the things that is so fascinating to me about this human experience is that the stress that we experience is like it all boils down to what we are perceiving as being dangerous. So let me back up a little bit. So what happens like in the stress mechanism, and if you're, is that basically there's like two nervous systems. I'm going to just try to simplify this as easily as possible. So there's like two nervous systems, right? There's the fight or flight reaction, and then there's the resting, relaxing, repair mode. I guess they call it now fight, flight, or freeze. But, you get that like the holy crap, like this is unstable, something like this is unsettling, something is dangerous, I'm threatened. And then there's the opposite, which is like when you're chilling, when you're resting, when you're relaxing, when you feel good. And then that is the optimal time for the body to repair itself. Now, the thing is about that adrenaline response, about that fight or flight mode, is that it's turned on in a reaction to what we call a perceived threat. And this has like been changing in the medical literature. It used to just be like when you're under, like when you sense threat. But I love that this idea, like that they're emphasizing the perceived part, because that's really what makes all the difference and everything for us, right? It's like, what is it that you're perceiving? How are you perceiving it? And then that is going to initiate an entire like physiological cascade in your body that is going to cause your adrenals to fire. The cortisol is going to go up. The adrenaline is flowing through your body, right? And then that creates this whole kind of change that happens in the body. And so you get this adrenaline that's flowing through your system. Now, let's think about like how we evolved for this to happen. So what happened was that the body evolved to handle short-term stresses, right? It evolved to handle like the short-term assault. So, you would either see like a saber-toothed tiger or like a bear or a lion or whatever, and then the adrenaline would kick in, right? And you would either run to safety or you would be eaten. Either way, once you were safe or once you were eaten, like it was done, right? So there was no other major threat to be perceived. Your adrenaline wouldn't keep firing. It was like very clear and present danger that would cause this reaction, and then it would stop. Now, what's happened in our modern day world is that we are able to perceive and anticipate threats for a long time. So what happens here is that when we simply perceive a threat, right? So you perceive the bear or the rabid dog that's like chasing you, right? That's a perceived threat. We could also say it's a very real threat, but it's a perceived threat. So it's triggering your body to respond. But what happens now is that we're so good at anticipating threats or creating them, as the case may be, that if you think about like, if you are in a space right now and you were to really like anticipate that in 2 weeks, your accountant, like you have a meeting with your accountant in 2 weeks and you're like terrified that the accountant is going to tell you that all of your money is gone or your savings account is decimated. And if you anticipate that meeting and you anticipate that that's what they're going to say, even if you have no evidence at this moment that that's what's going to happen, but you are convincing yourself that that's what it's going to be like in 2 weeks, well, you've already triggered that fight or flight reaction. And as you keep feeling that and anticipating it and expecting it, or even being afraid of it, your body's going to stay in this overdrive. And it's going to stay in this heightened state of fight or flight. And this is what is so damaging to our bodies because we haven't evolved to sustain this amount of adrenaline, to stay in this kind of place of that fight or flight system to be going and be active for so long. And this is where we start to see, like, people get that fat cortisol belly, the weakened immune system, the disordered eating. So, you might start craving a lot of sweets to try to make up, to get you that energy boost. And then you get in those all sorts of weird rhythms. Your sleep can be totally messed up. Like oftentimes when this happens over a long period of time, people might get that like sort of energy boost at like 10 p.m., right when they should be winding down. And then it's really, really difficult for them to get up in the morning because your entire adrenaline system has shifted, right? So now everything is backwards, where instead of getting that burst to help you wake up and greet the day, everything is reversed. And so our bodies are just we're not meant to be able to handle that. So like the other example that I like to give is if there's a farmer, let's say, who is like in the middle of a drought and is not, the crops he's afraid that the crops aren't going to grow, or he sees that it's not going to be a good yield and they're concerned about losing the farm and all of that, right? His body can be in that very real fight or flight response. And somebody else somebody who's like a socialite or a celebrity or something, and they've got a big gala and, all the paparazzi are going to be looking at them and everything. And all of a sudden they chip a nail and then they go to the thing, right? If their sense of safety and security and who they are is wrapped up in those appearances, the fact that the appearance is not perfect, they too might also enter that fight or flight reaction if they think that their well-being is threatened because they don't look perfect. If they feel that they're going to get a bunch of, shit from the people, or, made fun of by the other people in the party, or not invited back because they just couldn't, like, they didn't look like everybody else, right? That can also trigger that fight or flight reaction. So that's where the perception of the threat is so important. And this is where all of the kind of the mindfulness and especially non-attachment comes in, because so often, like if you're listening to this podcast, like I said to the people, like if you got a chance to listen to the Zooms last week, or if you're listening to this podcast and you've got it on your iPhone or your computer, or you're like driving in your car and you're able to like have the Wi-Fi and the technology to do this, chances are your life is not in immediate danger. Chances are, in fact, there is not a real imminent threat to your well-being, even in the corona time, right? So how beautiful is that luxury, right? Most of us live a life where we're not worried about a bear attacking us when we walk down the street. We're not really worried about, not being able to have any food. Sometimes, right, things happen and that can come up for sure. But for the most part, most people that are listening to this find themselves in a pretty safe environment when we look at the entire arc of the human experience. Now, the thing is that most of the stress that, my audience and I think the Western audience encounters is because we make it up. We choose to perceive threats to our well-being all the time. But the perceived threat, the thing that we're really afraid of, usually isn't like, am I going to live or am I going to die? Most of the threats that we have are actually attacks on our ego. Most of the threats that we experience and that we're worried about come down, I think, to what are people going to think about us or think about me? Right? So if you were to have to go on food stamps, if you were to have to move back in with a friend or your parents, if you were to, whatever the catastrophic things were, if you were ostracized by your friends, if somebody says you're not enough, so much of the energy that we put into, and that is the backbone of the stress in this Western society, has to do, I believe, with appearances. Because at the fundamental level of it, you still have a breath. You still have life. We can breathe into our hearts. Right? Even if you fall on hard times, even if you're homeless. Right? I mean, now there's tent cities everywhere. That's like a whole other it's like a whole other conversation. And sure, there are certain challenges that are going to happen. Absolutely. Right? If that were to happen, I wouldn't ask for that to happen, but if it did, right, there would be all sorts of challenges. But the beauty is that we can adapt. But if we hold on to the stress and to the tension, if we hold on to what are people thinking about me, how are they perceiving me, how am I perceiving myself, then our entire baseline of wellness can be eroded. Right? We've completely surrendered our power to this invisible sort of they. And what's worse about that is that we stay in a heightened state of fight or flight. We stay in this place where, we're on high alert, and for really no, evolutionarily speaking, no real good reason. Now, there is something to be said about how being ostracized from your community is arguably sort of worse than death. Right? I heard a story a long time ago that there was a tribe that if the biggest punishment that they could enact to somebody is they wouldn't actually kill them. They wouldn't let them come back into the tribe anymore. That's how strong our desire is to belong and to be accepted. And so, we can honor that, right? And we can look at that. And so just like in the practicing of the mindfulness and non-attachment, my suggestion is just to become aware of that dialogue, become aware of that internal dialogue. So there's some questions that I like to ask myself and I ask my clients to ask themselves, right? When you find yourself in that heightened state where your heart is racing, you might be sweating, you're just generally more tense, you're not feeling as great as you'd like to be. You can ask yourself, am I in immediate danger? Does someone have a gun to your head, right? Are you being run off the road? Are you in immediate danger? And if you're not in immediate danger, then you can 100% know that the entire occurring that's happening in your body is because you are choosing to perceive an event in a particular way that's causing you stress. And most often, that thing is because you want to belong. And you want to be liked or accepted or celebrated or whatever, but it's about wanting to belong. And so when we can put that desire to belong out in front of us, I like to imagine myself sitting in front of a blank wall. And so instead of these thoughts being inside of me, I like to just put them up on the screen. And to see how strong that desire is to be liked and to belong. Now, it's not everybody, right? But I believe that it's most. Then we get to see how, like, just honor that desire. And is there an opportunity to honor that desire without necessarily having to put yourself in a heightened state around it? Right? And it's just be like, yeah, I wanna belong, and I'm afraid of, losing my friends or losing my family or losing my job. And it's like, okay, cool. That's what's happening. And we also don't have to dive into that. You don't have to embody all of those feelings. It can just simply be an observation. And it might be one of those observations that you want to remind yourself again and again and again and again. Because if we're not calling it to our attention, it can creep up, right? And so much of this is like the thing with success. And you hear people that have success and they talk about like the extra stress that's there, right? And a lot of times it's because it's like the achieving it, what they thought the achieving of it was going to be challenging, but maintaining it can be even more stressful because they become used to things. They have a certain lifestyle. People are used to seeing them looking a certain way. And if that were to go away, what would the stories be about that person, right? What would that downshifting in class or decorum or like, the way you present yourself, like what would people think about that? And really, it's like, who cares? I mean, like, we care, but it's also like, do you have your health? Do you have your breath? Are you still part of an ecosystem where you get to breathe into the miraculousness of this life? And I realize, and I'm so grateful for the luxury right now to just be able to have a podcast, to be able to have this kind of conversation, because there are many, many people who are in immediate danger, who are not in a safe place, who are struggling, who are hurting, who are fearing for their lives. And if I can allow myself to tap into that for a moment, to feel that collective of those people that are in danger, it's like I feel this like extra burden. Burden's not the right word. This extra responsibility to like get over my shit and like live life to the fullest. Because if somebody else can't, right? And if I'm in a space where I can do that and where I can give back, where I can serve others and I can be present and love on the people I can love, perhaps the energy, the ripple effects of all of us living that way might be able to provide some sort of collective conscious, healing or support to those people who can't quite see out of the darkness right now. So if you find yourself, if you're one of these people who is recognizing that you're just stressed out all the time, all right, you might want to step back if you can and just bring like a super logical approach to it. Just be like, am I in immediate danger? No. Okay. So everything else that's happening here, I'm perceiving it. I'm choosing to believe whatever it is. And oftentimes it's because we're fighting like hell to protect and preserve our ego. We're trying to protect this image of ourselves. We're trying to protect the mask or the appearance, the robe that we put on, out in the world of like, oh, look at me, look at how I do this, look at that, whatever. Because when we just tap into like underneath all of it and we connect with our heartbeat and we take an opportunity to just feel the sacredness of this moment and how precious this life is, how precious this moment is. And to know that it can all be gone in a heartbeat. There could be a solar flare that just kills us. I mean, there's all sorts of shit that can happen very quickly. And is the cost of that anticipated threat, the scenario that most likely will never actually even come to pass, is it worth it for that to prevent just the honoring and the sacredness and feeling the fragility and the power of this individual moment. So can you allow yourself to drop in to your heart space, to drop into your body, to follow the inhale and watch the exhale? And what if the purpose of your life was to have just one incredibly conscious breath? What if the purpose of your life was to experience one full inhale and one full exhale where you were in complete unity with the divine? What if that were the purpose? And you never fulfilled it because you were always worried about what might happen in 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years or 20 years or whatever. There's just, look at the time we live in right now with this corona shit. Like, we just can't predict some of these things. We just never know what's going to happen. And so allowing yourself to come back, to experience a moment, this moment, as fully as possible. And if you do that, you'll see that most likely, again, if you're listening to this, like, chances are you're not in immediate danger. And really, like, what is danger anyway? You know? In some cases, like, this is part of the thing that I think is so kind of curious about this this response to this, pandemic, is that, like, can we have just an acceptance and an ongoing conversation that people die, that we all will die, and that's what happens? And to what extent do we need to go to, like, save everybody from something that is inevitable? And the cost of prolonging life. It's like, just extending life without actually encouraging people to live in a good way seems really silly to me. So we're going to keep prolonging lives where their emotional system is dysregulated, we're eating shitty food, right? They're sick. They may not ever bring a good mood, right? But we have to keep everybody alive for as long as possible because that's, like, what, our moral duty? And the stories are tragic. When people pass away from this, like, it's horrible. It's sad. Like, there's, on the individual level, like, it's the thing. And at the same time, like, none of us make it out of here alive. And I think all we can really do is celebrate the time that we have. But if we're constantly in a fight or flight state because we're choosing to perceive threats, then it's really challenging to just come back and enjoy the moment. And this is where, in our class, we talked about doing deep breathing. We talk about essential oils. All right. We shared some techniques. My book, Unlearning Stress, is a bunch of the techniques, on how to shift some of that if you're struggling with it. But know that at a fundamental level, it comes down to, like, how we choose to perceive situations. And if all you do is ask yourself, like, am I in immediate danger right now? And if the answer is no, right, then you can use that as a permission to take a deep breath and just follow the breath. Imagine the air coming in your nose. Imagine what the air looks like as it leaves your body, and just do that over and over, over and over. And there's going to be all sorts of things that your brain is going to tell you that you're not enough and you got to do this. And, who are you just to take a deep breath? Like, there's all these things that have to be worried about. And again, you can choose to engage with those thoughts, or you can just see them and be like, yeah, okay, hi, I see you. Thank you. Yeah. And I'm following this breath. And when you use the tools of the deep breathing, this kind of mindfulness, I love the aromatherapy, especially, like, something like Siberian fir or balance. The doTERRA blend balance is great here. Adaptive is great. Copaiba is amazing, right? You can use the power of the plant medicine to also, help bring your your nervous system back into balance, right? The smells and the aromas can trigger that limbic system to just induce this wave of chilling out, of relaxation that can help you to gain even more perspective on what are the threats that I'm perceiving. Right. So some of the Byron Katie, the work, right? I think it's questions of like, is this real? How do I know this is real? I forget what the other questions are, but these are great questions. Like, is it real? Am I in immediate danger? Okay, great. If we say, yes, I am, yes, this is very real. Of course, like there's so much uncertainty. I might lose my job and I've already lost my job. And is the government check going to come in? And like all of that stuff is really real, right? That stuff is real. However, in this immediate moment, do you have a roof over your head? Are you able to take a deep breath? Do you have access to food? And are you loved? Right? And if there's no one else around you to love you, right, then we can love ourselves. Or your pets love you, or like, plants are appreciative of the fact that you water them and all the things. And to chunk it down into just getting one moment into the next. And this can help to start get a handle on it. But when you start to recognize, again, to bring to your conscious awareness that when you're experiencing that fight or flight reaction, it's because you have chosen to perceive something in a way that is threatening. So some other questions that I like to ask myself when this is happening is like, okay, how might this situation be working for me instead of against me, right? Because oftentimes when you're in that reactive place, you just feel like everything that's happening is happening to you. And I just like to flip it around because it's all in the power of our perception. We get to choose how we're going to perceive it. So let's condition ourselves to perceive things in a way that's going to be more fun, that's going to be more enjoyable, more sustainable. So, the question is, how is this working for me instead of against me? So rather than always looking for the ways that the universe is out to get you, right? How is it that the universe might actually be working for you? What is it that you can take from this situation that's going to help you to be stronger? And then the biggest one of all, you guys have heard me talk about it, the biggest one of all is, what am I grateful for? How can I be grateful for this situation? What is the thing that's happening here that I can be really thankful for? Where is the silver lining that I can find it? And the research is showing that gratitude is the thing that pulls us out of the despair. It pulls us out of the shame and the guilt, right? Which when we look at the energy, all that energy that goes into protecting our sense of self, right, but really guarding against feeling shame, really guarding against feeling, guilt and shame. And so gratitude, we're finding, is the way to transform that physiological reaction, to change the wiring in the brain, to disrupt those patterns of shame and guilt. And what am I grateful for? Like, okay, yeah, I don't know where the rent money is going to come in next week, but in this moment, I'm really grateful for the fact that the sun is shining. I'm so grateful that I had some food to eat. I'm so thankful that I have running water. I'm so thankful that, I have a clean home. I'm so thankful that I have a pet, right? Like whatever, doesn't matter. It's just about allowing yourself to not just say the thing, but to really feel the gratitude. And if you can't be grateful for the breath, well, isn't that interesting? That says a lot to me about where your kind of value system is, and how perhaps you've stacked so many things on top of your existence and your purpose for existence that you've forgotten, you've lost touch with the most fundamental nature of this existence, which is the breath. And give yourself permission to not have to handle, all the other layers on top of that. Give yourself permission to just come back and experience the breath for a moment. Taking that nice big inhale now. I like to hold the breath for a few seconds and then a big exhale out. You can do that again and again and again, and your physiology will change. And if you've been holding up the world, if you have been carrying, a lot of energy for a lot of people, use this as permission to just put that down for a bit. because all of those people, they don't need you to carry all the things for them. What they need is for you to be healthy so that you can still be present and to love and to support them. And if we're in that constant state of fight or flight because we're perceiving threats everywhere, then it's going to be really hard to feel good. So if you have dread about what the future might look like, that's okay, right? You can throw that out there, but then come back into this moment. In this moment, are you sick? In this moment, are you safe? In this moment, do you have a roof over your head? We got to just chunk it down and come back. And you're going to start to engage with your body in a different way, in a much, much more healthy way. So let me know what you think. As always, I love to hear from you guys. PleasurePointsPodcast@gmail.com. And you can follow me on Instagram @James E. Rohr. Thank you, as always, for being here, and I'll catch you later.